Hello and welcome to the final highlight show of what has been a dramatic and exciting 1993 season, brought to you by Mircoprose and GP2Joey. We're in Barcelona for the final 3-day post-season test, and although the big names like Ayrton Senna, Joey Davies, Michael Schumacher and Alain Prost are away on their respective holidays, now is the time for other drivers to share the limelight, as some get acquainted with their new teams, who in several cases in turn get their first tryouts with new engine partners. With the banning of driver aids for next year, the big teams are all running without active suspension, traction control and ABS brakes, and while testing is no barometer for performance, it is a chance to finally get 1994 underway early. In the morning session, Kelvin Burt was out in the Brabham along with Coulthard in the Williams, and Michael Andretti getting his first taste of the Lotus chassis, fitted of course with the Chevrolet engine that the team are going to be running for the next 3 years as Lotus merges into Andretti. Hakkinen was out for McLaren, running the Ford engine, managing to race past Jean Alesi in the Ligier Prost, but in the morning it was Hill who was fastest ahead of Hakkinen, Coulthard and Blundell in the other McLaren. Verstappen impressed in the Brabham in 17th, while Jacques Villeneuve lingered down the bottom in 27th. In the afternoon session, Coulthard was on it from the get-go, with Eddie Irvine and Barrichello also trying to challenge well in the Jordan pair. But it was Damon Hill again who set the pace, with Herbert looking to try and find a way past Hakkinen and Mark Blundell in the McLaren. Blundell, the team's test driver this year, as Herbert and Tyrrell were trying to get used to the Porsche engines, and Katayama in the Mugen Honda-powered Pacific car managed to get at least 56 laps completed in the afternoon session, which is more or less a Grand Prix distance, without trouble. After the Pacific's team had had a traumatic 1993 season, their hope is obviously for better performance next year. Down at footwork, Christian Fittipaldi was in the other car aside from Jacques Villeneuve, and Fittipaldi was putting in some decent lap times, going 26th and 25th respectively, with Katayama still pushing later on in the afternoon with one of the Brabhams behind him there, but that was Damon Hill in the Williams who ended up staying fastest yet again. And it was Damon Hill that ran out the fastest runner on day one. Jacques Villeneuve in the footwork tried to impress, was 23rd for much of the day, but managed, after much setup problems, managed to improve his lap time performance, with Jean Alesi still going round in the Ligier as Michael Andretti continued to struggle, along with Gilles de Ferran, his teammate for 1994. But as the day drew to an end, it was Hill who ran out fastest yet again, 1/10 of a second faster than Coulthard, with Frentzen impressing in the Benetton in 4th, with Verstappen staying 17th, Barrichello 18th, and Jacques Villeneuve down in 27th out of 28 runners. Day 2 saw Martin Brundle driving for McLaren, with Pedro Lamy in the footwork and Derek Warwick in the Brabham, as the two Brabham drivers of Kelvin Burt and Derek Warwick continued to try and impress Joey Davies to see who was actually going to get the nod for next year, as Stefano Modena got his first taste of the Zach Speed Yamaha, and JJ Leto was out early as well, behind Lamy in the footwork and Michael Bartels in the Tyrrell, who was getting his first run, trying to bed in his Porsche engine ahead of his debut season with the team next year. But Pedro Lamy, although impressing initially in 13th position, dropped down the order towards the end of the morning. But it was Derek Warwick who was perhaps the surprise pace setter, looking very comfortable in the Brabham and arguably just as fast as Kelvin Burt had been, with Michael Andretti going round yet again in the Andretti Lotus Chevrolet. But it was Hunter Jr. who was back out in the Williams, impressing again, going fastest. But Alan McNish in the Benetton was also quickest. He was going first with 1 minute 20.371. But ultimately, at the end of the session, it was Coulthard and not Damon Hill, after the latter was taken ill, ahead of Hakkinen and Brundle, impressing in the two McLarens, with Lamy in 26th and Villeneuve improving to 21st in the footwork. In the afternoon session, Coulthard was on the pace from the off, with Martin Brundle going third fastest early on with a 20.3. But it was Mika Hakkinen who was desperately trying to improve also in the other McLaren, but Coulthard was relentless. Unser Jr. was fighting his way back as well in the second Williams, with the American looking set to be confirmed as one of the team's official test drivers for next year, possibly with a view to getting a full-time race seat, having impressed in 1993. But that is of course only dependent on whether Coulthard lands a race seat in 1994, as many believe if he doesn't, he will be the team's test driver next season. But the two Lotus Andretti and De Ferran were still battling it out in the midfield behind the Minardi of Michele Alboreto, who has landed the full-time drive with the Italian squad for next year, as Chevrolet continue to disappoint. But the much hope is that in 1994 their engine will be over 100 brake horsepower more than it was in 1993. But it was Heinz-Harald Frentzen late on who was pounding round the laps, along with Jos Verstappen, the Dutchman, the rookie, who was impressing again in the Brabham. And there is a lot of talk and excitement about him for the next season. At the end of the session, it was Unser Jr. fastest by 0.2 ahead of Coulthard, with a colossal 1 second gap to the leading McLaren of Martin Brundle. The final day's running saw Damon Hill return after his temporary illness, with Kelvin Bird taking over the duties for Brabham in the morning to be replaced by Derek Warwick in the afternoon. But as the field bailed out of the pit lane to start the day, it was Barrichello ahead of Kelvin Bird in the Brabham, with the young Briton, the British Formula 3 champion, absolutely desperate to impress those at Brabham to see if he can land a race seat for 1994, now that it was very much a consideration that he was going to possibly get the nod ahead of the veteran Derek Warwick, and the pressure was going to certainly be on Del Boy to impress in the afternoon. But it was Damon Hill again who was fastest early on in the Williams with a 1 minute 19.5, with Shauna Lacey languishing in the late teens in the Ligier Prost, with Villeneuve struggling once again in what has so far been a bit of a disappointing test for the young Canadian. But he's already confirmed in the IndyCar Series for 1994, and it is widely understood that this is not an opportunity for him to impress to get a race seat next year, but purely to get some F1 mileage, as Bernie Ecclestone craves to see the name Villeneuve in Formula 1. It's not going to happen in 94. Will it happen next year? But as the day came to a close, it was Hill fastest ahead of Frentzen, who was going even faster in the Benetton, ahead of the McLarens of Hakkinen and Brundle, with Unser Jr. next up, with Verstappen impressing in 17th. On what was a very productive morning for the Brabham team. In the afternoon, it was Coulthard back out for Williams, with Derek Warwick back out for Brabham, with the Englishman desperately trying to improve his chances of getting into the race seat for 1994. Early on there was disaster for JJ Leto, who spun in the Sauber, bringing out the yellow flags, as Unser Jr. posted the fastest lap time initially of a 1 minute 19.294, but the young Finn was able to get his Sauber underway again without damage, whilst teammate Carl Vendinger crossed the line in 5th position early on, just focusing on consistent race speed, with Herbert trying to impress and racing against Scottish countryman or British countryman Alan McNish, who was impressing again in the Benetton. Although the Scotsman doesn't really have a chance of a race seat for next year, Benetton do rely on him for his consistency behind the wheel, as Brundle impressed yet again in the McLaren, in what has clearly been a marker that the McLaren chassis in 1993 was a very good car, massively let down by the underpowered and overweight Chevrolet engine, which is now in the back of the Andretti Lotus. But it was another struggle for Villeneuve. He couldn't get the right balance or braking balance in the car, and languished down the bottom end, as Derek Warwick continued to impress in the Brabham, trying to fight his way past one of the LaRousses there of Philippe Alliot, and unable to do so. But in the end, Unser Jr. impressed once again to go fastest ahead of Coulthard in the running but it was an impressive Frentzen again, who was third late on until a final run in the peloton saw the German smash his own personal best to go second behind the American in the final standings. As the 1993 season came to a close with Unser Jr. first, it was Hakkinen who ended up just at the death, taking the second fastest away from Frentzen and Martin Brundle, with Villeneuve languishing down in 27th. So that's it. It's the end of the 1993 season. It's been a dramatic and exciting one, but next year promises, with new cars, new teams, new drivers, to be perhaps the greatest season ever. So we'll look forward to seeing you next year for the 1994 season. Thank you for watching this year, and we hope you fully enjoyed it. And we'll hope to see you on the racetrack very soon.